I'm Stephanie Kidd, and I want to welcome you to the Kentucky Valley Educational Co-ops, the Holler. Today, we're going to talk about mean, median, and mode. And I want to talk to you about some ways that we can do this through the CSA model. Now, when I talk about the CSA model, what I want to talk to you about is that we need to do it with concrete materials. And I know you're thinking, oh, wow, that's going to be hard, but really it's not. It's very simple things that we can do. We also need to make sure that they're seeing semi-concrete, that they're drawing it and they're moving things around in their head and not just on paper, but also in their head. So I want those kind of things to happen for them. Another thing is that I want to make sure that they understand the abstract. So we're going to kind of combine all of this today because they've done all of these things in the past. They just don't realize that how they've done it and how it can be broken down. Many of our students who have a processing disorder, when you start asking them to do more than one thing, they have trouble with doing that. So two-step problems like mean, where they have to add them all up and then divide, they forget things like that. So we want to make sure that they have those opportunities to be able to break it down and see those. So today we're going to start by just going ahead and doing some different ones. So that's what we're going to do today. And I want us to get started with mean. So let's say that we're doing mean and we're using just certain numbers. So in today's case, we're going to be using the numbers 4, 5, 6, and 10. So if I'm using 4, 5, 6, and 10, how can I show that for my students as being concrete? Well, one of the things that I like to use is counters. So counters are important because when we use counters and they can see those counters, what we do is they can maneuver those. So another good way to do that. Another thing that we can use in my handy dandy bag over here is base 10 blocks, or these are unit blocks. So we're going to use those today. And that's what I'm going to use today because sometimes with the older kids, they don't want to use counters, even though we can use those for many things. These are more in their understanding of how to, or sometimes when they're older, they want to use things that they feel more comfortable with. So this is one of the things that they can use. And plus they're in most classrooms, so they can be able to grab these. Um, so first of all, I just tell the student, I said, what is mean? And we talk about that when we talk about mean is the average. It is what each person should have if we distribute it correctly, those kind of things. So we talk about mean and we talk about the definition for mean and we talk about how mean is to add them up and then divide. So and I try to use smaller numbers. That's the other thing. I always want to use smaller numbers with my students when I'm doing the mean, especially when I'm first starting out. So let's say that we've got 4 and I have them to literally put 4 down below it. And then I say, okay, 5, and they put 5 below it. And sometimes our kids won't space them out exactly even. And then I say, okay, now let's put 6. And so they put 6 down below this one. And then we do 10, of course. And when we do 10, there's 10. Now my next question is, what do I need to do with these numbers that will help you out? And so remember, how do I get them to be equal? Because remember what we said, it's going to be the average. Everybody's going to have the same, pretty much the same amount. So we talk about, this goes back into when you were in second grade and you did fair share, or when you were working with multiplication and then division. Remember how we do division? Well, division is again fair share. So that's what we're going to do here. So of course we've got 4, 5, 6, and 10. We're going to add them up. And I say, when we add them up, remember, when we add them all up, all this comes together. And now, how many numbers did I have? Well, I had 4, 5, 6, and 10. So now, if these were people, and we could change their names and they were people, we're going to fair share out. So when I fair share, each person gets 1. That's the way we fair share. Remember, each person gets 1. And we keep on doing this. And we can get into the part of if we have a remainder, what happens, those kind of things. But for right now, let's just do each person has 1. And we'll talk about that. So here I am. I'm making sure each person has 1. And you can have this on little plates or whatever. So at this point, We do have one left over. So what's going to happen with this one? Now, in my case, most of the time with my students, I would not have this to happen. I would actually have made this 5, a 6, and this an 8, and then this a 10. But in this case, I wanted to talk about what happens when I have one left over. Well, this is my case of I could divide this little guy up and each person, and that's why I sometimes like to use counters, because I can use those plastic ones, and I've got some of them that's already cut, because I'm the queen of scissors here, and I have been known to cut the manipulatives up so they can see it. So I would have a couple of those that's probably already cut, to where I can say, okay, how many pieces I'm gonna have to divide this up into, and it would be 1/4. So he would get 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, or 0.25, because we can talk about that too with this. So this could be 0.25, or it could be 1/4. Now, how many did you get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did this one also get 6 in this case? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. And remember that 1/4 is down here. So, and I would just go ahead and just put a little sheet of paper down there and say, oh, yep, we need to remember that's 1/4 at the end. This is another way that you could do this, because they got 1/4, and we could just put a little sheet of paper down there at the bottom. That is 1/4. So we will do that. We will actually put the little sheet of paper down there that says 0.25, 0.25. In this case, it's going to represent this little guy, 0.25. And so when they notice that each one of these have 6 and 0.25, then at that point, we know now that we have the mean, or the average. So this is what we want them to be able to do. We want them to be able to split these up and do this again. So let's go ahead and do this one more time, just with 3 numbers. And we'll use even simpler numbers this time and move this away. And so we're going to do this time with just, this is probably how I would start out anyway, is 2, 3, and 4. And so if we're using simpler numbers, 2, of course, putting 2 here below this, 3, when we talk about, okay, I'm just creating this, and 4, so down here is going to be 4, and then I say, okay, remember we had to add them all up, so I push them all together, and then I say, okay, now we have to fair share, or we have to divide by the number. How many do we have? 1, 2, 3, so we're dividing by 3, and so we're going to fair share these out. They fair share out, and they continue to fair share out. And then you say, oh, wow, what is the mean of this? And so the mean is how many did each get? That would be 3. So keep that in mind when you're doing mean. One of the ways that you can start out so that they get the understanding of what mean really is to walk them through using some concrete manipulatives. It's very good for them to be able to do that. It's very important for them to be able to do that. So like I said, keep that in mind, that there are manipulatives out there that they can use to do this. Now, our next thing that we're going to talk about, of course, is median. And in median, I wanted to use some different numbers, because median's a little different with them trying to find it. And one of the things that is great for us to be able to have is some wonderful cash register tape. This doesn't cost a whole lot, or just a strip of paper. So they just need a strip of paper. Everybody probably needs the same size. So if you could cut up just a couple of strips of paper and let them have this. And then, of course, they will need, and I'm going to have to find it, our wonderful handy dandy tape measure. So one of the things I begin to tell them is, okay, we're going to have a strip of paper, and they're going to need probably some scissors, or somebody's going to have to be involved with some scissors. Cut it off, and I only start with smaller numbers. So let's say in this case, I have 7 numbers. I'm going to measure over to the 8, and I'm going to start at 0, because guess what? I'm going to have a little bit of spot left in the front and a little bit in the back. And as you can see, I'm measuring here on my strip. And when I'm measuring, I'm going to take my pencil, and I want to mark on the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, 5. I'm just going to mark these straight down. Not a very good straight marker, am I? All the way over to 8. And the reason why I did over to 8, even though I only have 7 numbers, is I want that same gap in the front and the back of that number line. So I'm going to remove my ruler now. I'm going to actually write my numbers down that I'm using. So I'm using 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7. And then as you see, I've got this spot. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually cut that. Now this works wonderful if these are odd numbers. So now I'm going to fold this over, just fold it, because the median is literally the middle number. And where it catches on this line here is my number. And if you notice, my number is 3. So it caught right on that number, which is perfect. And so this is 3. And I try to do this with an odd amount of numbers first. And then we talk about even numbers and what happens if it was a 2 and a 4. It's the number that comes in between. And so they can fill that gap in. And I taught them to do that if we needed to. So a good example is, let's say I'm looking for the middle number. And the middle number in this case is, let's just do 5 and 9. And that's where the gap would be. And they're somewhere in the center. So I talked to my students about, at this point, writing 6, 7, and 8 in there. And then going ahead and, okay, we know this and this is the number, this, and marking them off, and then coming to this. Because sometimes they need those multiple steps to get to that point. So if we can do that, that's perfect for our students to be able to get that understanding of median. Remember, not all of our students learn in the same way, so we have to have multiple techniques for them to do. And I really like the folding of the paper for my students, because I help them to understand when I'm truly meant median. It's the median of those numbers, not just, oh, I can just see it on a number line. Now, so that's median. Mode. Mode's a little different for our kids. And here's another one that I've done for median that we could have done and just folded and seen the answers to. And so for this one, if I folded, you can see it's 13. But on this one, we've got multiple numbers on here. And I want my students to see the mode. Well, many times if they have trouble just putting, if they're just looking for the mode and they have trouble with putting numbers in order, and we've worked with putting numbers in order and used to tape measure and those kind of things, but they're still having that trouble, I tell them we're going to color code. So I'm going to pick a color. And right now we've got purple. So I'm going to do all just the 6s in purple. And so they would go through and they would mark the purple. And then I would go through and I'd say, okay, now the 8s are going to be green. And so they would mark the 8s in green. Well, there was not very many 8s. And then I would say, okay, what about the 9s? And so there's only one 9 and we mark it in red. And then we go through and we do the next number, which is 10. We'd mark it in blue so they can see it. This color coding really helps our students. And then we would do orange for the 11, of course. And then 12 would be yellow. And then 13 would be this green color. And they would start to see, okay, which one do I have the most of? Well, so far, what I have the most of and the color that's the most on my page is what? Is the blue and the green. So, but they're the same amount there. And so we're going to go on over and we're going to get a dark blue. And we'll mark the 14 in a dark blue. And then we're going to get a peachy color and mark 15. And so they can just kind of go through the colors at this point. Again, you don't want to give them as many as what I did here. And then, of course, bright pink for 16. And again, we can do a brown for 17. And that one's a little different in size, but that's okay. And then of course, a dark green for 18. And now at this point, they can say, okay, which one did I have the most of? And so they can start to see which one do I have the most color on, and that would be 16. Now, if they're able to line them up and they put them on paper and they put them at each one of the marks, we can go through and we can cut these, which is really cool. And then they can kind of do a little graph with them on how many numbers do I have of each one. So that's what we're doing right now. I'm just going to cut them up again, and they can start to see which one did I have the most of, which I like this method also. So here we have, I'll cut them up. 6 has 2. 9 only has 1. 11 is just 1. 8 is 1. See how I'm moving them around here? 10 has 3, 13 has 3. Oh wow, 16 has 4. And so they're getting a good visual here of moving these numbers around, which I really like for our students. 18 only had 1. 14 only had 1. Oh, I have another 2 here. So what number has the most on here? So these only had 1. And then down here, of course, I can see that this has 6, this has 10. And then this one has 16. And that's what I want them to be able to see. Oh, this one's the most. So the mode in this case is 16. And sometimes they'll see it and they'll be like, well, there is no mode. There's not one that has the most. So, because all of them were the same amount, maybe I had 2 of each number or something. So those kind of things is important. The one that has the most, the modes and those kind of things. Talking them through. Now, outliers, what I like to do is I like to use a measuring tape again, and you can use a measuring tape and go through, and they will just put a dot on the numbers. And so they'll put a dot above it, kind of like in a bar graph, and then you'll start to see, oh, well, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I had 22. Is there an outlier there? Well, if 1, 2, 3, and 4 is the numbers you've had the most of, and then all of a sudden, guess what I have is 22, I have an outlier. So using a measuring tape to show those and just putting some dots above it or something, or even counters above it, and let them see if there's one that's really far out there compared to the others. So giving them that concrete experience with this, using the CSA model, writing it out, drawing it out, and creating those kind of things really help our students with mean, median, and mode, and even outliers. And then again, I want to thank you for watching our videos. We greatly appreciate it. Hopefully this helped with a student. And if it did, you can give me a holler back at stephanie.kid@theholler.org. We greatly like to hear from you. Thank you.